sometimes. I wish I had just a little bit more. I went to a concert at the Stanley Theater in Utica, and here it's that Clemens play. And I remember one note that he played. One note, and I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about that one note. It must have been 4 or 5 measures long, and he just started down here with absolutely perfect control, and just played that note, and played that note, played that note, played that note. When he got way up here, he just pressed his little finger a little bit, lifted it off, and you could still hear the note. And I thought about that note, what a beautiful long note it was. He has absolute control over the bow. Now, most of us don't have that control over our bow. In fact, it gets away from me quite often. When I get to going too fast, sometimes my fingers can't keep up, sometimes my bow can't keep up.
The first thing, Alice, you didn't mention was that you were talking about the bow. And the thing that interested me is my daughter was telling me how those things could cost $2,000 and better.
Oh, yes.
And I said, well, how would they cost such a figure as that? Well, she says the balance of the bow.
Right in the balance.
Yeah, they're liable to run $2,000 or $3,000 for a bow.
Yeah. Graham Townsend plays with a bow. I think it was $5,000. But he also plays with a real Magini. Now, this is a copy of a Magini.
Yeah.
I know it's a copy because there's no name in it of any kind. And it has an extra swirl up here, and it has double purfling all around. It's a little bit thicker in the belly than some fiddles. And it's a copy of a Magini. Both violins that I have with me are copies of Maginis.
Yeah,
But Graham plays on a real one. It's registered, it's been authenticated. And the bow he plays with, I think, is a $5,000 bow. So.
yeah, they're very expensive.
He don't leave it laying around. He doesn't leave it laying around.
The other thing, what was the name of the tune you just played?
The Ashton Rose Waltz, and it was written by a Canadian, a man that lives in Ottawa, and his name is Leo Brown.
Yeah.
And he wrote the Ashton Rose Waltz. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful waltz. There's some lovely, lovely waltzes.
It is a lovely waltz.
Now, what would you like to hear played?
I want to ask you a question. How many different positions are there on Fiddling? I can work on.
Well, there's 7 that I know about. If they go beyond that, I don't know. But the positions on a violin, everybody's a little bit afraid of positions. But really, it's quite simple. When we're playing the violin, we generally speak in terms of fingers. And when we speak in terms of fingers, this is your first finger, second, third, and fourth, which really upsets some piano players that are trying to learn to play the violin, because they kind of go first, second, third, and fourth, and fifth. And but when we're talking about the violin, we talk in the position of fingers. So, all right, now here I'm on A. So you've got open, first, second, third. Now third position starts where your third finger would be. And as you go up the violin, your finger positions become closer together. And if you have 5 fingers, so here's 4, if you had 1 more, or when you're up in third position, if you started where your third finger is, that'd be 5th position. So you'd be third position towards 5th. You start up here to get your 5th position. It'd be the same thing with your 7th position. You start up here to get your 7th. And there you begin to run out of keyboard.
You know
that
I'm
high. Not many of us play in 7th position much, except to reach a high note there once in a while. And a lot of us do try to get there and reach a nice high note sometimes. But that's what your positions are on your violin. So in second position, a great many fiddlers use it, and they don't even know they're in second position. It just become handy for them to get the notes in. So they put their first finger where their second finger would be. A lot of times they slip into that. George Harrogate plays a great deal in second position, especially when he's double stopping. He uses second position a lot. But see, fiddlers a lot of times don't even know what they're doing on the violin. And if I hadn't been lucky and had people explain it to me, I wouldn't either. I know I don't know what key I'm in until I get the last note a lot of times. I don't bother to tell Barbara. Her ear is so good that she can find my keys so easy. And if I tell her, I'm apt to tell her wrong. So I just don't bother to tell her, because she's better at it than I am.
That's another thing then. You just mentioned double stopping. What is that?
All right, double stopping is playing 2 different notes on 2 different strings. You're double stopping. In other words, you're playing it's harmonizing with yourself on another string. And a lot of people play a drone string. It's very, very famous in Scottish style music. Your drone string. Let's do. that for you. She was nice enough to have a plate and a cup and saucer all ready for me over there tonight, the senior citizens. And they fed us a wonderful dinner. And I just thought of that right after I played Loch Lomond there, and I thought maybe you'd like Robert Burns' pretty song there. So that's what double stopping is, and what's known as a drone string playing. Now they have cross tuning playing on a fiddle too. Now this is a very interesting thing. I never knew about it, and I heard the Black Mountain Rag. And of course, a lot of my music I learn by listening to it. I don't learn too much by music. I have learned to read music, and I can read music quite well now, but I haven't learned too many tunes that way. But I learned my music by listening to it, and I was listening to this tune, and it sounded like they were playing C sharp on the E string. That would be this note, but it sounded like it was on the E string, which has a sound all of its own. And I thought, my goodness, what are they doing? Well, my daughter has a good ear, and I called her up and I said, Sharon, if you're not busy, come on down. I want you to listen to this record. It sounds like C sharp is on the E string. Well, C sharp was on the E string. In that case, they had their fiddle cross-tuned. But it took me quite a while to learn that they were tuning their violin different. Now, this grew out of the Appalachian Mountains when the men were down in the coal mines digging coal, and they would come up, and you fellows have worked hard all your lives. You have worked outdoors and worked at logging and worked at farming and other industries. Everything a man does, he clamps his hand to do it. You clamp your wrist, and then you wonder why your wrist isn't flexible on a violin. Well, if you're a barber, you do this all day, your wrist stays nice and agile. But if you hammer, when you would take a hammer in your hand, you lock your wrist. When you take a saw in your hand, you lock your wrist. Everything a man does, even driving a car, you kind of lock your wrist. Almost everything a man does, he locks his wrist. And the miners working down in those coal mines, they were using a pick and a shovel all day long. So by the time they got out at night, they couldn't move their wrists very easy. They couldn't finger very good. Their hands would be swollen up and probably all bruised up from working too. So they learned to tune their violins so that they wouldn't have to finger so much. They learned to cross-tune their violins so that they would have very little fingering to do. And you'd get your music out of a violin being cross-tuned. So they would tune their E string down to a C sharp. They'd leave the A, right tuned at A. They'd tune their D up to E and their G string up to A. So that made a perfect A chord right across your violin. If you played right across your violin, like this doesn't make a chord, but see, that sounds like a mischord. But if you put those notes together, it sounds like a chord. So they could get a lot more of their notes without moving their hands so much. And cross-tuning became very popular. They used to cross-tune their violin G, D, G, D. And another popular cross-tune is A, E, A, and A up here. No, E up there, the regular E up there. And in doing that, like a tune like Devil's Dream, you could play it up here and you can turn right around and play it down here, using exactly the same fingering. So it made it much easier. So that's what cross-tuning is. And I was glad to find that out, because here I was trying to play tunes regularly and play the notes they were getting, and I couldn't imagine how they could possibly do it. And it's because they had the violin cross-tuned.
Current release on the Folk Legacy label by Skip Gorman. I think there's 5 different cross-tunings that he showcases in this particular album.
Well, that traveled west for the people out of Appalachia, too. That traveled west because I know that Pappy Cash used it. He came from Oklahoma, and it was in common use out in Oklahoma. Now, in New York State, it's never caught on. Very seldom do we cross-tune our violins. Hal Casey used to play the Teenager's Waltz cross-tuned, and it was just beautiful, because you get harmonics all over your violin. You know, when you play, like you play third finger on A, that's a D. You get that right on, you hear a nice tone that lingers, and it's because you're hitting that harmonic. That harmonic is vibrating as you play this note. You can hear it ring afterwards if and it's because it's vibrating. When you play a note on one of your strings, it's vibrating there. So when it's cross-tuned and you're right in that chord, every string is tuned to one chord, then you get a lot of vibrations. So it makes a pretty sound. Is there anything else?
How old were you when you started playing?
7. And I hate to tell you, but I played for 59 years now. So that gives you, I'm not going to tell you how old I am now. But I played for a good many years. Of course, my first few years were pretty scratchy, and as I get older, it seems like they're getting pretty scratchy again. I guess you kind of go on a hump like that. Any other questions?
Play your Midnight Mouse now.
All right, this is a tune I wrote myself. I never, well, I did write it down, finally. Barb helped me and we put it on paper. But I made this up in the middle of a snowstorm. Coming home from, we had gone out, what was the name of that town out there where Doc Kelly lived? It's out near Syracuse. And we were coming home and it was storming terrible. We were in a little Ford Fiesta, and my daughter Sharon was driving, and Jiggs had his head out one window and she had her head out the other window. And I had my granddaughter on my lap sleeping in this little Ford Fiesta. My big double fiddle case was down here, and this tune came to me. And I fumbled around, reached over my granddaughter, got my fiddle out of my case with a lot of bother, and I played it all the rest of the way home in the snowstorm because I didn't want to forget it. That really doesn't sound like a song. Are there any other requests?
Yeah, I'm trying to learn. Do you remember Barnes March?
The Barnes March? Oh, yes.
Get the second part where on the
All right, that's a little bit tricky, but it isn't hard. Actually, the part that's hard to play is the first part, because you have to slide up into the harmonics to do it right. Now, my great uncle taught me this song, and he had learned it from his grandfather.